Velkata stood at the observation deck of Kepler Station and watched the stars. The blue-skinned alien had 4 arms and moved with the grace that came from living in low gravity for most of his life. His people, the Zenthari, had built their mining colony on this small moon 300 years ago. They came here to harvest the beautiful crystals that grew deep in the rock. The crystals powered their ships and lit their cities back home. It was a peaceful life. The Zenthari were not warriors. They preferred to build things and study the stars. Their children played in the crystal gardens while their parents worked in the deep mines. No one expected trouble to come from the dark spaces between the stars. First sign of danger came when the long-range sensors picked up something big moving toward their system. Communications Officer Nexuna called Velkata to the control room. Her large purple eyes were wide with worry. "Administrator, you need to see this," she said. Her voice shook a little. "There are ships coming, many ships. They do not answer our signals." Velkata looked at the screen. The sensors showed hundreds of objects moving through space toward their moon. The shapes were wrong. These were not normal ships made of metal and technology. These things looked alive. They moved like sea creatures swimming through water, but they were flying through the vacuum of space. "How long until they reach us?" Velkata asked. 6 hours, Nexuna replied. "Maybe less. They are moving very fast." Velkata felt a cold fear in his chest. His people had no weapons. Their ships were for mining and transport, not fighting. The most dangerous thing on Kepler Station was the mining laser, and that was meant for cutting rock, not defending against unknown enemies. He activated the colony-wide communication system. "All citizens, this is Administrator Velkata. Unknown ships are approaching our system. As a safety measure, all mining operations will stop immediately. Please return to the station and wait for further instructions." The next few hours passed. Like a bad dream, the alien ships kept getting closer. When they finally came close enough for detailed scans, what the Zenthari saw made their blood run cold. The ships were alive. They had no smooth metal hulls or clean lines. Instead, they looked like giant insects or sea creatures covered in thick, dark armor. Parts of them moved and twisted like they were breathing. Some ships had long tentacles that reached out and grabbed pieces of space debris, pulling the matter into their bodies. "They are eating the asteroids," Nexuna whispered as she watched the scanner readings. The largest of the creatures was over 5 kilometers long. It moved at the front of the group like a leader. Smaller ships swam around it in patterns that reminded Velkata of fish following a shark. When the creatures reached the outer edge of the Zenthari system, they did something that made every person on Kepler Station freeze in terror. They began to change. The ships broke apart and reformed into new shapes. Some became long and thin like spears. Others grew wide and flat like nets. They were adapting, getting ready for something. That something became clear when they attacked. First wave hit the automated defense satellites that orbited the moon. The Zenthari had built these machines to watch for space debris and small meteors. They were not meant to fight off an invasion. The bioships swarmed over them like hungry animals. Instead of destroying the satellites with weapons, the creatures simply absorbed them. The metal and electronics disappeared into their bodies, making them slightly larger. Velkata watched in horror as the same thing happened to their communication relay stations, their mining platforms, and their transport ships. Everything the bioships touched was consumed and turned into more themselves. "They are not here to conquer us," he said quietly. "They are here to eat us." The attack on Kepler Station itself began 2 hours later. The bioships landed on the surface like drops of acid rain. Where they touched the ground, the rock and metal began to dissolve. The creatures were turning the solid matter of the moon into a liquid that they could drink. The Xanthari tried to fight back. They turned their mining lasers on the invaders, but the beams barely slowed them down. The bioships seemed to learn from each attack. After the first few laser hits, their skin grew thicker and began to reflect the energy. Panic spread through the station. Families ran through the corridors trying to find safe places to hide, but there were no safe places. The creatures were eating the station from the outside in. Velkata knew they had maybe an hour before the main power core was reached. After that, everyone would die. He found Nexuna in the communication center. She was still at her post, even though part of the ceiling had already started to dissolve above her head. "Can you send a message beyond our system?" he asked. "Yes, but who would we call? Our homeworld is too far away. By the time help arrives, we will be gone. Send it to everyone. Broadcast on all frequencies. Maybe someone out there will hear us." Nexuna's 4 hands moved quickly over the controls. "What should I say?" Velkata thought for a moment. His people were going to die. Their culture, their art, their knowledge, everything would be consumed by these terrible creatures. But maybe, if someone heard their message, they would remember that the Xanthari had existed. Say this: "Any who receive this message, we are dying. Grid coordinates 847.3. They consume everything. Please ... remember us." The message went out into the darkness of space at the speed of light. It traveled past dead stars and empty planets, past ancient civilizations and young species taking their first steps into space. 847 light-years away, Lieutenant Jake Morrison sat at his post aboard the UES Defender. He was monitoring deep space communications during the night shift. Most of the time, he heard nothing but static and the background radiation of the universe. Tonight was different. A signal came through the static, faint but clear. The ship's computer worked for several minutes to translate the alien language. When the translation appeared on Jake's screen, he felt his heart start beating faster. He reached for the emergency communication button that would wake up Captain Lisa Hayes. This message was too important to wait for the morning shift. The desperate cry from Kepler. Station had found someone who was listening. And that someone was human. Captain Lisa Hayes woke up to the sound of her emergency communicator beeping. She rolled out of bed and pressed the button with one hand while rubbing sleep from her eyes with the other. "Captain, this is Lieutenant Morrison. You need to see this right away. We received a distress signal from deep space." Lisa looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m, ship time. Jake Morrison was not the kind of officer who would wake her up for nothing. "I'll be right there." She dressed quickly and walked to the communication center. Jake was waiting for her with a worried look on his face. The translated message was still glowing on his screen. Lisa read it twice. Then she read it again. "How far away are these coordinates?" 847 light-years, Captain. The message is over 800 years old by the time it reached us. That means whatever happened there is long over. Lisa felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Unless ... Unless what, Captain? Unless these creatures that consume everything are still out there, still growing, still eating. She turned to Jake. "Send this message to Earth Command immediately. Mark it Priority Alpha. Then wake up the senior staff. All of them." The message reached Earth 6 hours later. Admiral Kyle Bennett was eating breakfast in his office when his aide brought him the communication pad. Bennett was a big man with gray hair and old scars on his hands from his days as a ship engineer. He had fought in 3 wars and fought. He had seen every kind of enemy the universe could throw at humanity. He was wrong. Bennett read the message, then called for an emergency meeting with the Terran Defense Council. Within 2 hours, every military leader on Earth was sitting around a large table in the underground command center. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bennett began, "we have a problem. A big one." He told them about the alien distress call. He explained what little they knew about the creatures that consumed everything they touched. When he finished, the room was very quiet. General Patricia Stone spoke first. She was the head of Earth's ground forces. "How do we know these creatures are still a threat? The message is 800 years old." "Because," Bennett replied, "we have seen them before." Everyone in the room turned to look at him. Bennett walked to the big screen and called up an old file. Pictures appeared showing damaged ships and destroyed space stations. 15 years ago, a deep space exploration ship called the UES Pioneer encountered something in the void between galaxies. The ship barely escaped. The crew reported biomechanical creatures that tried to consume their hull. "We thought it was an isolated incident." He changed the picture. 8 years ago, a mining colony in the Outer Rim went silent. When we sent ships to investigate, we found the entire asteroid field had been consumed. Nothing was left but empty space. Dr. Emma Stone, the general's sister and Earth's top scientist who studied alien life, stood up. "If these creatures have been active for 15 years, and they consume matter to reproduce, then they have been growing this entire time." "Exactly," Bennett said. "And if they consumed an entire alien civilization 800 years ago, they are much stronger now than when they sent that message." The debate that followed was short but intense. Some council members wanted to ignore the threat. The aliens were far away, and Earth had its own problems to worry about. Others argued that creatures which consumed everything would eventually find Earth. In the end, it was Captain Amy Ross who settled the argument. She commanded the newest and most powerful ship in the Earth fleet, the U.E.S. Valiant. She was young for a captain, but she had never lost a battle. "With respect, sirs," she said, "we are not talking about whether to help some aliens we have never met. We are talking about stopping a threat before it gets strong enough to destroy us. These creatures learn and adapt. Every world they consume makes them smarter and more dangerous. If we wait for them to come to us, it will be too late." "Admiral." Bennett nodded. "Captain Ross is right. The decision is made. We mobilized the largest battle fleet in human history. The next 24 hours were the busiest in Earth's military history. Every shipyard from Mars to the outer colonies received the same message. Prepare every ship that could fly and fight. Engineer Chief Matt Sullivan worked without sleep for 3 days straight. His job was to outfit the fleet with the newest weapons. He installed experimental plasma cannons on the heavy cruisers and quantum torpedoes on the destroyers. The weapons had never been tested in real combat, but they were the best humanity had. Commander Ryan Clark gathered his pilot squadron on Mars Station. The Reaper Squadron was made up of the best fighter pilots in the Earth fleet. Ryan had shot down more enemy ships than any other pilot alive. His people trusted him completely. "Listen up," he told his pilots. "We are going up against something new, something that adapts to our weapons and tactics. We will need to be faster and smarter than we have ever been before." Dr. Emma Stone studied every piece of information they had about the bioships. She learned that they operated as a group mind, sharing information instantly across vast distances. She also discovered their weakness. They were weak to certain frequencies of energy that disrupted their biological processes. Commander Beth Taylor, who ran Earth's intelligence service, worked with the science teams to figure out how much time they had. Her computers calculated the growth rate of the creatures based on the size of the alien civilization they had consumed. The answer was not good news. "If our estimates are correct," she told Admiral Bennett, "these creatures have consumed at least 40 different worlds in the past 800 years. They are no longer just a threat to one species. They are a threat to all life in this part of the galaxy. The final fleet that assembled near Earth was unlike anything humanity had ever built. 847 ships of all sizes formed up in perfect formation. 12 massive dreadnoughts led the way, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Behind them came 89 heavy cruisers, their new plasma cannons gleaming in the sunlight. 234 destroyers formed the outer ring, fast and deadly. And spread throughout the formation were 512 of humanity's best fighters. Admiral Bennett stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked out at the fleet. Every ship represented years of work and billions of dollars. More importantly, every ship carried human beings who were willing to risk their lives for aliens they had never met. Captain Nick Parker volunteered his destroyer, the U.E. Swift Arrow, for the most dangerous job. His ship would jump to the alien, system first, alone, to scout the enemy and send back information for the main fleet. "Are you sure about this, Captain?" Bennett asked him over the communication link. "If these creatures are as dangerous as we think, your ship might not survive long enough to report back." Nick smiled grimly. "Someone has to go first, Admiral. My ship is fast enough to run if things go bad. And if they are not, well, at least you will know what you are facing." As the fleet prepared for the quantum jump that would take them across 847 light-years of space, Bennett thought about the alien message that had started all of this. Someone had sent a desperate call into the darkness, hoping that someone, somewhere, would hear them. They had been wrong about one thing, though. They asked to be remembered. But if Admiral Bennett had anything to say about it, the Xanthari would not need to be remembered. They would be rescued. Captain Nick Parker felt his stomach twist as the U.E.S. Swift Arrow came out of quantum jump. The sensation always made him feel sick, but this time was worse. Maybe it was because he knew what he might find in this system. The first thing he saw was that they were too late. The Xanthari homeworld hung in space like a dying animal. Most of the planet was covered in a black, writhing mass that pulsed with sickly light. What had once been blue oceans and green continents was now a network of biomechanical structures that looked like veins and arteries spread across the surface. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Sarah Miller from the sensor station. "What have they done to it?" Nick stared at the main screen. The beautiful crystal cities that the aliens had built were gone. In their place were towers of living metal that grew like cancer from the planet's surface. Ships were being born from these towers, emerging wet and glistening before flying away to join the massive fleet that surrounded the world. "How many ships are out there?" Nick asked. Sarah worked at her controls for several minutes. Her face grew pale as the numbers came in. "Captain, I count over 12,000 vessels. Some of them are—" She stopped and checked her readings again. "Some of them are 15 kilometers long." Nick felt his blood turn cold. The largest human ship was less than 2 kilometers from front to back. These creatures had built things that made human dreadnoughts look like toys. "Are there any survivors?" he asked. "Scanning now, sir." Sarah bent over her instruments. "I am picking up life signs from underwater cities on the side of the planet that faces away from us. The water seems to be protecting them from whatever those things are doing to the land. At least some of the aliens were still alive." Nick opened a communication channel to send a message back to Admiral Bennett and the main fleet. "This is Captain Parker reporting. The enemy is here in massive numbers. Planet is mostly consumed, but survivors detected. Be advised, this looks like more than just a feeding. The bioships are arranged in defensive formations. They knew we were coming." He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. "Take us behind. That moon, we need to stay hidden until the fleet arrives." The U.E. Swift Arrow moved carefully through the asteroid field that surrounded the outer edge of the system. The rocks here had been chewed up and partially consumed, leaving behind twisted shapes that looked like broken bones floating in space. 20 minutes later, a main human fleet arrived. 846 ships came out of quantum jump. At the same time, appearing in a perfect formation that filled space with the blue glow of their engines. For a moment, Nick felt hope. Humanity had brought everything they had to this fight. Then the swarm reacted. A sound came over the radio that made every human who heard it want to cover their ears. It was not really a sound, since sound cannot travel through space. It was something else, a vibration that went directly into their minds. 12,000 bioships began to move at once, turning toward the human fleet like a single organism. Admiral Bennett's voice came over the fleet communication channel. All ships battle formation. Fighters launch immediately. This is not a drill. Commander Ryan Clark was already in his fighter when the order came. The Reaper squadron launched from their carrier and formed up around him in perfect formation. Ryan had flown in many battles, but he had never seen anything like what was coming toward them. The bioships moved through space like sharks swimming through water. They had no fixed shape. Some stretched out long and thin like spears. Others spread wide like nets. A few of the largest ones split apart into smaller pieces that moved independently, but stayed connected by thin streams of living metal. Reaper Squadron, target the small ones first. Ryan ordered his pilots. Do not let them surround us. The first wave of bioships reached the human formation, and the battle began. Ryan's fighter screamed through space at full speed, its plasma cannons firing bright blue bolts of energy at the nearest enemy ship. The shots hit the creature and burned holes in its dark armor. The bioship twisted in pain, but kept coming. Behind him, Ryan could hear the voices of his squadron as they engaged the enemy. Target destroyed, called out Lieutenant Tony Davis. Wait, no, it is not. The pieces are moving on their own. That was the first horrible lesson the humans learned. When they destroyed a bioship, it did not always die. Sometimes it broke apart into smaller creatures that were just as dangerous. The heavy cruiser, Hughes Thunder, opened fire with its new plasma cannons. The bright beams cut through space and hit one of the medium-sized bioships. The creature screamed across all radio frequencies as half of its body was burned away. But even as the humans watched, new tissue began to grow where the damage had been. They healed themselves, reported Captain Linda Ross from the Hughes Valiant. Weapons that worked a minute ago are becoming less effective. Admiral Bennett realized what was happening. These creatures learned from every attack. They were adapting, their defenses in real time, becoming stronger with each shot that hit them. All ships, change your weapons frequencies every 30 seconds, he ordered. Do not give them time to adapt. The space around the Xanthari homeworld became a storm of energy and explosions. Human ships fired everything they had, while bioships swarmed around them like angry wasps. The quantum torpedoes from the destroyers tore massive holes in the enemy formation, but more ships kept coming from the planet's surface. Captain Amy Ross maneuvered the Hughes Valiant through the chaos, using the ship's powerful engines to stay ahead of a group of bioships that were trying to surround her. Her weapons officer, Lieutenant Mike Carter, kept the ship's guns firing non-stop. Captain, we have a problem, Mike called out. Those things are learning to dodge our shots. They know where we are going to fire before we do. Amy gritted her teeth. The bioships were not just adapting to their weapons. They were learning to predict human tactics. This was worse than anyone had expected. The battle spread across the entire system as both sides maneuvered for advantage. Human fighters darted between the larger ships, their small size making them hard for the bioships to catch. But the creatures had fighters too, small, fast things that looked like flying insects with razor-sharp wings. Commander Beth Taylor monitoring the battle. From the intelligence ship UES Observer, watched the tactical displays with growing alarm. "Admiral, we are losing ships faster than we are destroying them. At this rate, we will be overwhelmed in less than 2 hours." Bennett knew she was right. The swarm had more ships, and they were learning from every exchange. But he also knew that retreating was not an option. If they ran now, these creatures would follow the human fleet back to Earth. "All ships, new plan," he broadcast to the fleet. "We cannot win by trading shots with them. We need to get to that planet and destroy whatever is making those ships." It was a desperate plan. To reach the planet, they would have to fight through 12,000 enemy vessels. Many human ships would be destroyed. Many people would die. But down on the planet's surface, in the underwater cities where the last Zentari survivors were hiding, something impossible happened. The aliens detected the human ships fighting in space above them. Elder Kexvoller, leader of the survivors, could not believe what his instruments were telling him. Someone had actually heard their desperate message. Someone had come to help them. Someone had answered their call. The battle had been raging for an hour when Commander Steve Harris realized his ship was going to die. The UES Thunderbolt was trapped between 3 large bioships that were slowly eating away at his hull with streams of acid. His engines were damaged, and his weapons were running out of power. In a few more minutes, the creatures would break through and consume his entire crew. Steve looked around his bridge at the faces of his people. They were scared, but they were not giving up. These were good people who had families back on Earth. They deserved to live, but sometimes good people had to make hard choices. "All hands, this is the captain," Steve announced over the ship's communication system. "Prepare for emergency evacuation to the escape pods. We have 3 minutes." His weapons officer, Lieutenant Carol Green, looked at him with confusion. "Sir, the escape pods will not survive in this battle zone. The bioships will catch them." Steve smiled sadly. "The escape pods are not for everyone, Carol. Just for you and the crew." Understanding dawned on her face. "Captain, you cannot be serious. There has to be another way." "There is no other way," Steve said quietly. "But maybe there is a better way to die." Instead of launching the escape pods, Steve did something that no swarm creature could predict or adapt to. He turned his dying ship directly toward the largest bioship and pushed the engines to maximum power. The UES Thunderbolt accelerated straight at the enemy vessel like a bullet. The bioship tried to move out of the way, but it was too big and too slow. Steve's ship hit it directly in what looked like its central brain structure. "For the blue folks down there," Steve said into his radio. Just before his ship's reactor exploded, the explosion was so bright that it could be seen across the entire system. The bioship that Steve had rammed was completely destroyed. But more importantly, the explosion seemed to confuse the other bioships around it. For several seconds, they stopped moving and just drifted in space. Admiral Bennett saw what happened and felt his heart break. Steve Harris had been a good captain and a good friend, but his sacrifice had shown something important about these creatures. "All ships, did you see that?" Bennett called out over the fleet channel. When the large bioship died, the others around it stopped working. They are connected somehow. Dr. Emma Stone was watching the battle from her science ship when Steve made his sacrifice. As a scientist, she was trained to notice patterns and connections. What she saw in the moments after the explosion made her very excited. "Admiral Bennett, I need to talk to you right away," she called over the communication link. "Not now, Doctor. We are in the middle of a battle." "Sir, this is about the battle. I think I know how to win it." Bennett transferred her call to his private channel. "Talk fast, Doctor. The bioships are not just working together. They are connected by quantum entanglement at the subatomic level. When Captain Harris destroyed that large ship, it broke the connection to the ships around it. That is why they stopped moving. Bennett felt a spark of hope. Are you saying we can shut down their entire fleet? Not the entire fleet, but large sections of it. I have identified 47 ships that appear to be network nodes. If we can destroy all of them at the same time, it will cause a cascade failure in their communication system. How do we destroy 47 targets at the same time? They are spread all across the system. Emma had already thought about that. Quantum mines. We plant them on each node and detonate them simultaneously. The quantum explosion will disrupt their entanglement network. There was only one problem with the plan. To plant quantum mines, ships had to get very close to the bioships, close enough to be caught and consumed. It was a suicide mission. Admiral Bennett called for volunteers. Every ship in the fleet responded. Bennett had to choose only 47 ships from the hundreds that volunteered. He picked the fastest vessels with the best pilots. Ships that might have a chance of getting close enough to plant their mines and maybe, just maybe, getting away again. Lieutenant Commander Troy Anderson commanded one of the volunteer ships, the destroyer U.S. Eagle. His crew included some of the best people in the fleet. Sergeant Megan Cole ran the weapon systems and Corporal Alex Wright handled the engines. They had served together for 3 years and trusted each other completely. Listen up, people, Troy told his crew as they approached their target. We get in fast, plant the mine, and get out faster. The timing has to be perfect, or this will not work. Their target was a bioship that looked like a giant squid made of metal and flesh. It was surrounded by smaller creatures that moved around. It in protective patterns. Getting close would mean fighting through all of them. The U's Eagle accelerated toward the target at full speed. Megan opened fire with everything they had, clearing a path through the smaller bioships. Alex pushed the engines beyond their safety limits, making the ship shake and groan with the strain. When they got within 1 kilometer of the target, Troy activated the quantum mine. It was a small device, no bigger than a briefcase, but it contained enough destructive power to tear a hole in space itself. Mine planted, Troy announced. Now we run. All across the system, 46 other human ships were doing the same thing. Some of them made it to their targets and got away. Others were caught by the bioships and consumed before they could escape. Captain Julie Scott and her crew on the U.E. Salcon died when 3 bioships surrounded them just as they planted there. Mine. Lieutenant Bobby Turner's ship was cut in half by bioacid, but not before he got his mine in position. Dr. Emma Stone watched the tactical display as one by one the quantum mines were placed. 39 ships made it to their targets. 8 ships were destroyed on the way. It would have to be enough. All mines are in position, she reported to Admiral Bennett. Detonating in 10 seconds. Bennett opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, brace for quantum detonation. This is it, people. This is what we came here for. The mines exploded at exactly the same moment. 47 points of light appeared across the system, brighter than stars. The explosions were not like normal bombs. They tore holes in the fabric of space itself, creating tiny black holes that lasted for just a fraction of a second. Before disappearing. The effect on the bioships was immediate and devastating. Every creature connected to the quantum network suddenly stopped moving. The massive coordination that had made them so dangerous disappeared in an instant. Bioships crashed into each other as their shared intelligence vanished. Some began attacking their own kind, unable to tell friend from enemy. Commander Ryan Clark, still fighting in his damaged fighter, watched in amazement as the bioships around him became confused and disorganized. They have stopped working together, he reported to his squadron. All fighters attack now while they are confused. The tide of battle turned in that moment. Human ships that had been retreating suddenly found themselves fighting enemies that could not coordinate their attacks. The bioships were still dangerous individually, but without their shared intelligence, they were much easier to defeat. Captain Amy Ross brought the UES Valiant around and targeted the largest bioship near the planet. Her quantum cannons fired again and again, tearing chunks out of the creature's hull. This time, it did not adapt or heal. It just died. Admiral Bennett felt tears in his eyes as he watched his people turn defeat into victory. They had paid a terrible price. Hundreds of ships were damaged or destroyed. Thousands of people were dead. But they had found a way to win. Down on the planet's surface, in the underwater cities where the Zentari survivors were hiding, Elder Kex Voller felt something he had not felt in months. Hope. The quantum explosions had broken the swarm's network, but the fight was not over yet. Individual bioships still swarmed around the planet like angry insects. Without their shared intelligence, they were confused and desperate. That made them even more dangerous. Captain Amy Ross guided the UES Valiant through the chaos toward the planet's surface. Her ship had taken heavy damage during the battle. Half of her weapons were offline, and the hull had several holes that her crew was trying to patch. But Amy could see their target through the main VIEWSCREEN. Rising from the planet's surface was a massive structure that looked like a twisted tower made of living metal. It pulsed with dark energy and seemed to be breathing. Bioships were still being born from its base, emerging wet and screaming into space. "That thing is still making more of them," reported Lieutenant Mike Carter from the weapons station. "If we do not stop it, they will just rebuild their fleet." Amy knew he was right. The quantum mine explosions had cut off the swarm's communication, but the main intelligence that controlled everything was still alive. It was inside that horrible tower. "All remaining ships, this is Captain Ross," she announced over the fleet channel. "Form up on me. We are going to finish this." Only 200 ships answered her call. The rest of the human fleet was either destroyed or too damaged to fight. Admiral Bennett's flagship had been consumed by bioacid 30 minutes earlier. The Admiral himself was missing, probably dead. Amy was now the highest-ranking officer left alive. Commander Ryan Clark's fighter squadron was down to 8 pilots. His own ship was held together with emergency patches and prayer. But when he heard Amy's call, he immediately turned toward the planet. "Reaper Squadron, form up," he ordered his remaining pilots. "We are going in." The final assault on the swarm intelligence began with Ryan's fighters leading the way. They dove through the atmosphere of the alien world, dodging bioships that rose up to meet them. The air was thick with poisonous gases that the swarm had released, but the human ships pushed through. Below them, they could see what remained of the beautiful Zentari cities. The crystal towers had been melted down and reshaped into feeding tubes that carried nutrients to the main swarm structure. It was like looking at a world that had been turned into a giant stomach. Ryan's plasma cannons cut through smaller bioships as his squadron cleared a path for the larger vessels. Behind him, the UES Valiant and the other surviving human ships entered the atmosphere with their guns blazing. The swarm intelligence knew it was in danger. The massive tower began to change shape, growing weapons and armor as the human ships approached. Beams of energy shot out from its surface, destroying 2 human destroyers before they could fire back. Captain Linda Moore, commanding the cruiser UES Hammer, saw the energy beams charging up for another shot. She made the same choice that Commander Steve Harris had made earlier in the battle. "All hands, abandon ship," she ordered her crew. Then she turned off the evacuation alarm and flew her ship directly into the tower's main weapon. The explosion tore a huge hole in the structure's side. Green liquid poured out like blood from a wound. The tower screamed across all radio frequencies. a sound of pain and rage that made every human who heard it feel sick. But the creature was not dead yet. Amy. Ross brought the UES Valiant in low over the tower's surface. She could see into the hole that Captain Moore had made. Inside was a pulsing mass of brain tissue the size of a city block. That was the intelligence that had controlled the entire swarm network. "Mike, load our last Nova torpedo," she ordered. "Captain, if we fire that thing at close range, the explosion will destroy us too." Amy looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These people had followed her across 800 light-years of space to help aliens they had never met. They had watched their friends die in the battle above. They deserved to live, but sometimes doing the right thing meant making the hard choice. "I know," Amy said quietly. "But if we do not stop this thing now, it will rebuild. It will grow stronger. And someday it will find Earth." She opened a communication channel to the few human ships that were still fighting in space. "This is Captain Ross. We are going to finish this. Tell our families we did our duty. Tell them we saved the blue folks." Amy guided her ship directly over the hole in the tower. The Nova torpedo fired straight down into the creature's brain. The explosion that followed could be seen from 3 star systems away. The entire tower simply vanished in a ball of white-hot plasma. The shock wave flattened everything for hundreds of kilometers in all directions. When the light faded, the swarm. Intelligence was gone. Every bioship in the system stopped moving at the same moment. Without the guiding intelligence to tell them what to do, they began to consume each other in confusion. Commander Ryan Clark's fighter was thrown spinning by the shock wave, but his ship survived. When he regained control, he found himself flying through clouds of bioship wreckage. The enemy was destroying itself. "This is Clark to all surviving ships," he called out. "The primary target is destroyed. All swarm vessels are down. We did it. We actually did it." The rescue operations began immediately. Human ships that could still fly searched the planet's oceans for Xanthari survivors. They found them in underwater. Cities that had been protected from the swarm by the deep water. Elder Kex Voller was the first alien to be brought aboard a human ship. The old Xanthari had 4 arms and blue skin, and his large purple eyes were filled with tears when he saw the humans who had come to save his people. "Why?" he asked through the ship's translator. "Why did you sacrifice so much for strangers?" The human who answered him was Lieutenant Sarah Miller, one of the few survivors from Captain Parker's scout ship. She was covered in bandages and exhausted, but she smiled when she looked at the alien elder. "Because someone sent an SOS," she said simply. "And we happened to be listening. That is what people do." The final count of the battle was sobering. Of the 847 ships that had jumped from Earth, only 163 were still able to fly. Over 200,000 human beings had died in the battle. The largest space fleet in human history had been reduced to a small group of battered survivors. But the Xanthari species survived. Nearly 800,000 aliens were rescued from their dying world. And more importantly, the Void Swarm's expansion into this part of the galaxy had been permanently stopped. 3 months later, Admiral Sarah Mitchell arrived with the second fleet to relieve the survivors and help with the rescue operations. She found the remains of the greatest space battle in human history scattered across an entire star system. She also found something else. The rescued Xanthari had insisted on building a monument at the battle site. It was made from the crystal that their people had been mining for centuries, shaped into a spire that reached up toward the stars. Carved into the crystal in both human and Centauri languages were the names of every person who had died in the battle. At the top were simple words. "They heard our call and came. We will remember." Elder Kex Voller stood with Admiral Mitchell as they looked at the monument. The old alien had learned to speak human languages during the rescue operations. "Your people gave everything to save strangers," he said. "We want to make sure that sacrifice is never forgotten." Mitchell nodded. "It will not be forgotten. And it will not be the last time. If someone sends an SOS into space, humanity will answer." The story ended with the construction of the first Choig human Xanthari defense station at the former battle site. Two species that had never met before were now working together to make sure no other civilization would face extinction alone. The universe was still dark and dangerous, but it was a little less dark when people stood together against the void.